Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second of the series of Imagine If webinars shaping the future of healthcare with AI. My name is Stasa Stankovic. I am a PhD student in genomic medicine at the University of Cambridge, founder of Innovation Forum Serbia, and I will be your host for this event. This webinar is organized by Innovation Forum Organization in collaboration with Science Technology Park Belgrade, Health Tech Lab, and Tech London Advocates Balkans. We're all here today thanks to the Imagine If Accelerator program for startups in healthcare run by Innovation Forum, which from the very beginning, since it was introduced in Serbia, had a clear mission to establish a firm platform of healthcare and business professionals, young innovators, and investors for boosted development of healthcare startups in Serbia, stronger interdisciplinary and international collaboration, and attraction of local and global investment. For the realization of the program in this event, we owe special gratitude to our official sponsors, Roche, AstraZeneca, Oxquant, and Swiss Contact, as well as to our partners and a strong network of industrial and academic representatives that closely work with us. In the center of the attention, we put topics and ideas with the potential to revolutionize the way we practice medicine and treat patients, as well as individuals who are driving the discovery and implementation of those changes. One of those topics is artificial intelligence. It has been playing a robust and growing role in the world for the past few decades, and it presents itself in many forms that impact daily life. One major area where AI is growing rapidly is the medical field. As there is a fear of AI surpassing human tasks and ability, there is a significant research as to how AI can aid in clinical decisions, support human judgment, and increase treatment efficiency. What are the current applications of AI in healthcare? What are the fears and hopes for AI? These are all the topics that we will be interested in during today's discussion. While founders should lead the way, governments are feeders of ecosystem success. They're responsible to provide a stable academic system to educate young talents and build financial and policy supported mechanisms that will enable translation of emerging disruptive scientific ideas into revolutionary technologies. That's why I will start the introduction of our speakers with a lady who immersed herself in many sectors to drive the change in Serbian ecosystem, closely working with the government, academia, and industrial partners. Her name is Dr. Milica Đurić Jovicic. She is an acting director of the Science Fund in the Republic of Serbia. She has been director of Innovation Center at the School of Electrical Engineering at the University of Belgrade since 2013. Her mission today, leading Serbian Science Fund, is to assist the social, technological, cultural, and economic development of the Republic of Serbia by financing scientific and R&D projects from all areas. Our next panelist is Paul Agapov. He's a health informatics director for AstraZeneca, using machine learning and real-world evidence for better development of therapeutics in oncology. Welcome, Paul. Our third panelist, Galia Varier, is a technical program manager at Microsoft. She works for the commercial software engineering team, where she collaborates closely on software development projects with healthcare customers around the globe, incorporating the application of AI, data analytics, and machine learning. And our last panelist, Dr. Vladimir Kovacevic, is a bioinformatics analyst working for Bridges on creating, optimizing, and running bioinformatics analysis, such as reconstruction of the whole genomes. In parallel, he has been teaching a course of genome informatics at the School of Electrical Engineering for 3 years. Last but not least, our great moderator, Petar Savic. Welcome, Petar. Petar is an entrepreneur with a keen interest in acceleration within an emerging deep technologies. Moreover, he is the founding partner of a London-based deep tech accelerator fund, Supreme Factory, connecting the Balkans with the UK and beyond. Today, we will have fantastic speakers, and I will let them to introduce themselves. So just very briefly, who are you? And again, welcome. Galia, we can start with.
Hi, Galia Warrior. I'm a technical program manager at Microsoft based in London, UK, and I work in a team where we collaborate with our healthcare customers across the globe. Glad to be here. Thank you.
Well, maybe we could start with Milica. Can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, hello everyone. My name is Milica Đurić-Jovičić. I am acting director of the Science Fund of the Republic of Serbia.
Amazing. Paul?
Hi, I'm Paul Agapov from AstraZeneca, Health Informatics Director. We use machine learning, real-world evidence in therapy development.
Finally, Vladimir.
And Vladimir, hi, I'm bioinformatics analyst from Bridges. I have a technical background in electrical engineering, and I switched to biomedical sciences and the bioinformatics 5 years ago. Since then, I've been working on analysis of the genomics data, predicting cancer markers, reconstructing genome, and extracting useful information from it.
Okay, great. Well, let's get straight to it then. I would like to ask the first question to Galia. Could you briefly explain what the machine learning, data science, and AI is, and what is the difference? You've been working in Microsoft for a long time, and I had the pleasure of working with you in some projects like Teams in AI and Acre and Aspirations. We're young people, and you did a great job of explaining AI even to kids or to anyone who doesn't know much. So please.
Right, well, thanks, Peter. No pressure. So I wanted to start with a bit of a joke, which has been coined by our colleagues at Microsoft. So we're saying that the difference between machine learning and AI is that if it's written in Python, it's probably machine learning, and if it's written in PowerPoint, it's probably AI. Well, there's a bit of a joke element to that, but reality is that there's been a lot of hype in the last few years around the potential of AI, and especially starting with the more of advanced deep learning algorithm and techniques in place. Realistically, what we see in the world is that most of the business value is driven by the standard, very well-known, very well-explained use of supervised learning, whether it's classification or regression. And it's basically learning those inputs and mapping outputs effectively. And now we can see that they work still very well. They coupling with them with deep learning neural network algorithms, it makes things much more effective at the scale. And I think one of the reasons why it's so exciting to be working with these technologies now is the fact that we've enabled the development of a lot of powerful and useful application across various industries. And you can think of just application of speech, computer vision, machine language translation, general natural language processing algorithm. Within your specific area of work, it's likely already been happening for a while, or it will be there very soon.
Amazing. That's a very good explanation. Thank you, Galia. And I would like to ask the next question to Paul and Vladimir. And it is about if you could give me some good examples of applied AI in healthcare, whether that's drug discovery, precision medicine, diagnosing microbiome, or robotics in surgery, or even telemedicine.
Okay, Vladimir, do you want to go first? No, it's me. Okay, so I'll try not to say anything that Vladimir is going to say. I think the chief way in which AI and machine learning can be useful in healthcare is in what we technically call sort of non-parametric problems. We very dimly understand most biological systems. So using detailed statistics, it's often statistical models, is not appropriate to handle these things. So AI and machine learning gives us a leg up on these complicated, messy systems. So for example, something like drug discovery. There is this terrible attrition rate through drug discovery. You might have seen that you start out with something like 10,000 candidate chemicals, you might end up with one usable drug. Machine learning gives us a way we can wield and meld in all these other types of information in order to optimize this process. Another way, and this sounds very prosaic, is just finding patients with particular diseases. You might think that it would be clear to find all the patients who had breast cancer, all the patients who had prostate cancer, or ILD, or something like that within a hospital record, but that's not actually quite clear. Machine learning, NLP, things like that, gives us ways that we can more easily recognize and find and type patients from the cacophony of data that we have available to us. Vladimir, over to you.
Yes, it's very interesting to think about why artificial intelligence and machine learning penetrated so deeply into so many different, not only health and medical areas, but different areas of life in general. So the way I see that, there are a couple of reasons. Sorry for going a little out of the question. But I think that the first one is that it is something that we used to read about when we were little in SF novels, and we fantasize about, and nowadays it became reality. And the second thing is these large community efforts that enable users with minimal technical and programming knowledge to train and use models easily, sometimes even with a few lines of code. And the third thing is it actually gives good results very fast. So this is why it entered into so many areas. What Paul mentioned, I would mention also image analysis, so recognition of, for example, melanoma detection, analysis of the brain images, also healthcare administration, voice recognition could be used there to speed up things. Then the immunotherapy and the cancer treatment, which we will tell about later, and of course all of that is mostly related to finding also the causes of the diseases. For example, finding which exact genes are connected to which diseases. So yeah, you can talk about it probably every day, all day.
I'm sure, but thank you so much for that great explanation of applied AI in healthcare. And Milica, would you like to tell me more about what are you really excited about in your work and the experience you had in Serbia by working on some of the AI related projects?
Yes, of course. Now with all these new possibilities that are introduced not only by technology but also by increasing the data and having all this hype about either machine learning or deep learning AI, however the research team want to call it, it is definitely very exciting period to be engineer or computer scientist or actually any kind of researcher or developer that is related to this industry. As the Science Fund of the Republic of Serbia had this special fund that is dedicated to AI, we invested 2.4 million euros for programs that are related to AI applications. Not only for applications in health, but any kind of AI that will be developed and put to some good use by Serbian research community. So with this special program, we had actually 70 applicants, and which is actually 70 teams from different parts of Serbia, and it was very attractive and very interesting call for all of them. And we were excited to see what are the proposals, what are they dreaming to do or to develop, and for the let's say participants, very multidisciplinary area, very significant, definitely with some limitations and some major opportunities. So it is a very exciting area for us, and this is now finalized. The program is now starting. We have selected 12 programs, 12 projects, and they will do their project implementation in the next 2 years. Unfortunately, only one of the grants is related to health and AI, but we will discuss about that, I think, further during this topic.
Yeah, thank you. I was going to ask you what's the percentage of the healthcare in the system, because I'm sure there is a lack of access to capital in the Balkan region. However, the global venture capital is booming in terms of healthcare. And it's very interesting what you do and how you're supporting our scientists. And I call this more of a venture science than venture capital, because you're investing in some great PhDs and some amazing projects and really innovative solutions. And where do you see now a Serbian ecosystem compared to the rest of the, I guess, emerging Europe when it comes to AI and then that grant funding?
This is still being analyzed. It is very hard to make this distinguished, because we have a lot of Serbian scientists and engineers that are working abroad and actually try to work and collaborate with either Serbian companies and or Serbian scientific institutions. And so what we can see is that we have not only potential and people who know how to do it, but also some very interesting and very important results in AI applications. What I also wanted to mention about our call and everything that Science Fund does, all our research and all our applicants prepare their proposals in English, and this is evaluated by international first reviewers and expert panel. So for our program, we hired experts from USA and UK and experts from Switzerland, and we asked them to be really be very hard and critical, because we want to select top projects that are not only bring something in AI, but also something that can be representable to anybody else around the world. And based on that, they really selected, it was part competition, and what was finally selected, they claimed that those are the projects that will be also supported in their own countries. This is the top quality and quality in terms of novelty, in terms of impact, in terms of implementation, and the quality of team. So I think this is very good start for this kind of program. And I'm also very excited that Serbia as a government, as a country, they're now starting implementation of this special strategy and action plan that is dedicated to AI and development in AI. So I think that this will have more investment in AI, not only in research, but also in industry, and that I think can really contribute more to the any kind of problem or application in health, quality of life, urban living, safety, you name it.
Yeah, that's some amazing news. Thank you for sharing that. And you mentioned briefly about negotiations with universities and then kind of being able to commercialize that or internationalize those pinouts from PhDs and academic projects. Let me ask this question to Vladimir, and it's about IP transfer. What is your honest opinion about IP transfer and how complex that can be when you want to develop something within the academia and then scale it and or globalize it?
Well, in a short, it could be very complex, but if you take the small steps, then it's much simpler, like with most of the problems. So if you want to talk about building a strategy or a community for AI in health, I can maybe share my experiences that we have with introducing bioinformatics to the Serbian community and the faculties. And in essence, bioinformatics is a science of collecting and analyzing complex biological and medical data. So in AI in health falls into this area. So the current situation is that we have a bioinformatics course. It's been going for a few years in School of Electrical Engineering, and we have another bioinformatics course in the Faculty of Programming and Mathematics. It's been going for 5 years, and this was enabled by a possibility that members of the industry are participating in teaching some subjects on a usually master or PhD studies. And we have a good cooperation, and we've been able to create the course. The students were very interesting. So as a first small step that could happen in this direction is to try to introduce some parts of AI in health into bioinformatics with a few lectures, and in time, in a year, 2 or 3 years, it could develop into separate course. That's something that I can see as an opportunity. It's a very popular area, and we had good experiences with applying many students. Our subject at School of Electrical Engineering was took a record for applying the number of students that never applied to any other different subject. So I think that's a good starting point to try to contact not only government-owned but also private faculties. I think that they will also be even more interested in having courses of that curriculum in their institutions. Then we can also think about possibilities of organizing or creating possibilities for internships in the nowadays the new era that we entered without the concession. Many things are happening online, and we should maybe seek opportunities. So it is now able to connect possibly foreign companies that could give online internships to the students that listen to those subjects and the faculties, and that have some basic knowledge of artificial intelligence and its application in health. So those are some of the things that crossed my mind the last couple of days when I was thinking about this discussion. But I would be more than happy to listen to your experiences from the UK, and of course to try to see how it could be applied and maybe take some concrete steps.
Yeah, amazing. I'm sure we're going to share loads of connections further on and get some good examples. But thank you for sharing that. So I would like to ask Paul about general kind of global scene, how it looks like at the moment, because obviously AstraZeneca is a global leader when it comes to applying AI in healthcare, and I think it's somewhere around 80% of the projects are basically they come from AstraZeneca, which is absolutely fascinating. So what would be those biggest trends that you see, Paul, coming out at the moment?
Okay, so this is inevitably going to be shaped by my own biases and interests. So I think what we're living in at the moment is a transition between the interesting but not useful stage of AI to the useful, at least in terms of healthcare. I mean, certainly that's being a bit dismissive. You know, we've seen these great advances through things, image recognition, speech recognition, and so forth, and all that work comes out of Google. But in a way, a lot of that feels in retrospect now like low-hanging fruit. Now we're actually having to deal with difficult real problems. So one of the things that fascinates me is the way we're now moving towards graphs and knowledge graphs, for example. So we're not just talking about a simple neural network, we're moving out of table land, I like to talk about, and we're moving into the cacophony of data that's necessary for the real world. So we can take things like knowledge graphs where we have sparse, incomplete, and perhaps unreliable evidence, and turn these towards finding out which drug agents are possibly the more promising, or which patient subtypes there are out there, and so forth. The other big threads, I think, that are happening within AI will be to do with data, just simply data, where we're going to get it from, how we're going to get it together. We have a voracious appetite for it, but it's quite obvious that in AI we fall over sometimes when we deal with biased data sets, with limited data sets, with sparse data sets, yet that is the data that we have at the moment. So how are we going to make these bigger data sets as more representative, more useful ones out there? And how can we use unstructured data better? Because most of the information that describes our world is at best poorly structured. So those would be the threads that I'd pick.
So Galia, I would like to go to you and ask you more about Microsoft's innovation hubs like Reactor and Microsoft for Startups. We obviously share the same building. My office is there as well. So I would like to ask you for some of the examples of how you collaborate with startups, academia, industry in promotion of AI. And I know that, for example, Microsoft announced earlier this year a launch of a new AI for health project. So can you potentially tell us a bit more about that?
Yeah, of course. Yeah. So as Microsoft is such a large organization, naturally we do work with different parts of the ecosystem. So on the startup side, I think I'm happy to mention our partnership with AstraZeneca, and it's around the AI Factory, which is a partnership in France where we support startups through which going through the startup accelerator, and it's specifically dedicated into finding the new ways of using AI within health-related solutions, and some of those kind of ideas and areas which Paul just described around medical imaging, around connecting the patient data, understanding the kind of mining the data sets and understanding a bit more about the patients, and also within the drug discovery side. That's kind of one of the areas where we work with startups. We also work with non-profits, and there are kind of areas around AI for good and AI for health. One of the examples, which is again maybe more of a simple way of using specific technology, which is chatbots, and kind of coupling it with the custom imaging. But that was work which our team actually did with Novartis Foundation, and that was to develop AI-enabled, so that kind of was capability digital assistant for to detect leprosy, which is one of the oldest diseases known. It's pretty much eradicated in most of the world, but there's still estimated 2 to 3 million people who are still living with this disability and overall kind of stigmatization in the society. And essentially, we built and for that disease to be, for the people to be helped, people need to know that there's a multi-drug therapy available and it's free of charge for them. But to early detect those, skin kind of to see it on the skin, you need to see those images early enough. And obviously, the areas where it's really hard to access, hard to reach communities with poor access to healthcare overall in some of the developing countries, this is where using the mobile application where you can actually take a photo and send it through the service and actually get the response very quickly, or have actually a medical doctor who will take a look at the image and can actually give additional diagnosis is extremely helpful. So it's kind of one of the examples where it may be something we've heard a lot in the kind of other industry spaces, but it's making a real change in people's life.
Yeah, it seems like you're doing quite a lot in that field. But I'm particularly interested to learn more about the collaboration between AstraZeneca and Microsoft, particularly AI Factory for Health, and what can pharma companies gain in collaboration with IT companies like Microsoft. Paul or Galia?
I guess I can. Oh, sorry.
No,
I'll just
Galia, you first.
a couple of things, and then maybe you can
company.
give another view. It would be interesting to hear your perspective as well. I think for us, it's all about combining our, what we know. From Microsoft perspective, we are a technology company, we're a platforms company. We have the infrastructure in cloud, and actually bringing those capabilities, bringing specifically for the startups, it's bringing that technical advisory, resources who can help them to go through the progress of, building their solutions on the platforms. I think that's one of the important things where we see, and also we can help to bring them in our ecosystem of partners and actually bring them to market with our, help too. This is the way we see that collaboration. And Paul, anything on your side?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Okay, so in fact, I think Gali's made a good point. There's this whole issue of infrastructure there that I'm frequently guilty of saying to people in scientific context that I don't care about computers and networks and everything like that. I just want it to work. And so there's that whole engineering aspect out there. You might have 1 million patient records, but how can you deliver them to the people and the places that need them? How can you deploy machine learning systems in a robust way? So it's very important for that whole informatics and infrastructure aspect to just work, to enable. And I think Astra is very good at recognizing that there are things that they do well, and that there are things that they can get other people to do well. And in a broader sense, I think a lot of these problems here require knowledge from different areas. We need people who are good at that engineering aspect. We need people who are good at the informatics and the coding and the machine learning. And we need people from the domain. And if you isolate those too much from each other, if you try to do them and then just assemble them at the end, that is just not going to work. You do need a good collaborative relationship to get good results out in the end. There, Peter, does that do for you?
Oh, absolutely. Thank you for sharing that. Well, no, you mentioned the infrastructure and actually the whole ecosystem, and I'm interested to learn from Vladimir. What are your thoughts, Vladimir, on this potential in the Balkans? Because Balkan is being a heart of emerging Europe, and especially Serbia, who is very much growing in deep tech and R&D hubs. So what do you think? What are your thoughts about potential of AI and healthcare kind of infrastructure within this our region? Is it a fertile ground, or is something still to come?
Well, Melissa spoke about it briefly, and I didn't comment. I didn't know some of the things that she mentioned, and like just say that I'm happy that things are moving, and they're moving in a good direction. Of course, this area, it could be fertile. It has good genetical background, but unfortunately we are stuck a lot with administration, and for certain things they take 2 or 3 times more time to be done or to be acquired. And to be concrete, from the infrastructure, I think what's lacking in Serbia, by speaking to my other colleagues nowadays, is switching to cloud infrastructure. I think still many institutes or faculties, laboratories, they are still using and struggling with the local clusters, supercomputers, and they are not aware of the possibilities, and it's taking too much time for them to run the processing, the analysis, and to maintain all the infrastructure. So I think this is some of the directions that it's good to be headed to. Hope that covers your question.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for answering that. And now for the next part of our conversations, we're gonna be talking about AI and healthcare in particular. And for that reason, I would like to invite Stasha back to the stage to try to lead this part of the event. Stasha, what is yours?
So as we already mentioned, the increasing availability of healthcare data and rapid development of big data analytic methods has made possible the recent successful applications of AI in healthcare. In my personal example, we used AI to personalize health screening and treatments for cancer. And in general, this does not only benefits the patients, but the clinicians too. Enabling them to make the best use of their skills, informing decisions, and also saving time. So maybe for the rest of the discussions, we will be moving into more specific examples and motivations of applying AI in your specific companies and ecosystems. So Galia, what I am interested in is what kind of data types are you using to be analyzed by AI? What are the mechanisms that enable those AI systems to generate the results which are clinically meaningful? So, from the perspective of a clinical world, and also what are the disease types that you are targeting with these AI solutions?
Right. So there are obviously quite plenty of examples on the various sides. I think the one I just want to talk about, one of the projects which our team has been involved actually last year, and that's been in London. And that was, again, a collaboration, as you know, everybody's talking, and Paul, I think, mentioned that we also need to have the domain expert. It's not only the compute, it's not only the engineering effort, it's always the domain. And so we worked together with UCL and Great Ormond Street Hospitals, and that was a project which was aiming to improve physiotherapy care for children with cystic fibrosis, which is a chronic life-limiting condition. It's around 1 in 2,500 children are born with that, and it's actually, there's been improved prevention. There's no real treatment for that, but the hope is that we can increase life expectancy, and currently stands at the average of about 40 years old for those people with this disease. So in this particular scenario, when we were collecting data and how we were using it with this kind of AI look at it, there was a device which is a sensor has been connected to a specific equipment, and it would. The idea is that for each of the kid would have their own kind of treatment. They would need to have specific breathing exercises, and it's fairly boring for them because they have to do it very regularly, and there's not really nothing exciting for them, and it's pretty much for their life. And what the idea was there, and that was part of the project, that it would be a video game for them. While they were doing the breathing exercise, it would be a video game. So there was that gaming aspect. But at the same time, while they were doing that, we were collecting a lot of data, how every single breath essentially was collected, and how we're doing that. There was also Fitbit devices they were using to get the additional measurements around the kind of how the body reacts. And essentially, the team, our collaboration with the UCL researchers was that we were analyzing this data, we were using the machine learning techniques and the various clustering techniques at scale to actually create a highly focused advice. So it was a personalized advice to the individual patients. And overall, it was very successful, because for kids, they obviously, 6, 7 years old, they were super excited to be part of it because it was fun for them. At the same time, for the researchers, it's probably the first time that they could get so close to analyzing this data at such scale and at such granular element. So I think it's one of the interesting projects, and I was a part of it as well. So it was really great to see it happening and actually changing lives. Back to Sasha.
Stasha, we can't hear you. Can you hear us?
Can you hear me now?
We can hear you now.
Yeah, now moving from, let's call them more rare diseases into more complex diseases that involve larger number of patients, such as clinical trials. We saw in the past that AI has many potential applications in clinical trials, both near and long term. And AI technologies make possible innovations that are fundamental for transforming clinical trials. For example, combining phase 1 and phase 2 clinical trials, developing novel patient-centered endpoints, as well as having data-driven protocols and strategies that are powered by advanced AI algorithms that process data from, let's say, mobile sensors and apps, as well as electronic medical and administrative records. I've been aware that AstraZeneca has been involved in patient monitoring and revolutionizing the way we perform clinical trials. So, Paul, could you please tell us about that side of the story, but also what are the other examples of applications of AI that AstraZeneca is currently incorporating into everything?
Okay. So I think there is an industry-wide push towards AI in clinical trials for a lot of good reasons. Those who are less close to the pharmaceutical industry may not appreciate just how critical and how fraught clinical trials are. They're tremendously expensive to run. They take a long time to run. And they're one of the key reasons that we have so many drugs fail. They fail in the clinical trial phase, and why it takes so long to develop a drug. So obviously there are benefits there in optimizing that process, making it faster, making it more efficient. One of the reasons, as I said, one of the ways rather that AI can help is, as I said earlier, just in identifying patients. This is this cruel, strange need that we have. We cannot test a drug unless we can find enough people to test it on, and to test it on a statistically robust number and a reasonable population. Yet I think something like a third of clinical trials fail to find the number of patients that they need to run. Something like even a fifth of them, I think, failed to find even half the patients they want. So we end up with all these underpowered clinical trials in there, contributing to the failure rate. There is also just the whole issue of how we handle digitization. Now, digital trials, I think, are this great potential win for us. Rather than having to get a patient to visit the doctor's office once a month and do a series of tests to be assessed there, we can have wearables, devices, all sorts of things on them that monitor how they are doing around the clock, what's happening to them. But in order to harness and use this flood of data, we actually need AI to be able to wrangle that and interpret that there. And there's one very big thing in trials and actually in development, and that's the whole idea of what actual disease does a patient have. It's painfully aware to us now that a lot of the times when we're talking about a particular disease, a disease that has a certain clinical presentation, as they say, people may actually have some different condition underneath. For example, those of you who watch my Twitter or LinkedIn feed will have seen today I pushed out a paper that we did on asthma and how patients with asthma seem to have at least 4 different diseases running on the background that all get lumped together as asthma. Obviously, to treat these people effectively, we need to understand and cluster them and type them into these groups. And this requires wrangling and analyzing a great deal of longitudinal data, a lot of omics and molecular data, a lot of clinical data in there. So there's lots of opportunities in there, Stasa, that we could go with.
I guess now we're coming to the point where we discuss so-called clinical Odyssey, where we have a single patient going from one specialist to another specialist due to the inability to precisely diagnose the patient and treat them correctly. And I believe, I'll switch now to Vladimir, because this also is very relevant to the key
Okay, I believe we lost Stasha there for a second. Hopefully she will come back. Yes, she's back, and welcome back.
Yes, somehow I drop out. Peter, you kick me all the time. But now I'm back. So what I was referring to is that this clinical odyssey is very relevant to the key moment in the field of genetics, where we had the ability to read the human genome letter by letter, and from these letters being nucleotides, detect changes in the human genome responsible for the development of complex and rare diseases. And by incorporating genomic medicine, we are trying now to tackle this clinical odyssey. And by mainstreaming genomic medicine into everyday healthcare, we are actually helping those clinicians to pick the right target for the disease. And behind that target, we can see what is the disease code by the certain mutation. And many of the techniques that you described above have been adopted to address the various steps involved in clinical genomic analysis to interpret human genome data. And an AI system extracts useful information from a large patient population to assist making real-time inferences for health risk alert and health outcome prediction. Vladimir, 7 Bridges are being involved in developing flat platforms to analyze and interpret genomics data. Could you please describe what kind of work you perform at 7 Bridges, and in what way is this relevant to so-called clinical odyssey that we just mentioned? In what way we are assisting our clinicians in helping them to diagnose patients as soon as possible to avoid this long passing of the patient from one clinician to another?
Thank you. So the main project of the system is a cloud-based genomics or bioinformatics platform that enables easy access to the cloud resources and bioinformatics genomics tools to be used by scientists, by bioinformaticians, by people that do not have that much technical knowledge. So with literally unlimited computational resources, it is possible to upload, to store data and to perform the analysis or of any kind. So we offer also expertise, consulting in best ways to perform the analysis. I will give a couple of examples. As I mentioned, some of the things that I've been working on is Antigen Discovery. So neoantigens are short proteins that are expressed on the surface of the cancerous cells. So they represent cancer markers, and they have huge application in immunotherapy and in creating targeted vaccines that can be applied to the patient. And with that, the immune system will be boosted and able to recognize and destroy cancerous cells. So this prediction of neoantigens, it's possible to perform when there is known sequence data of the tumor tissue and on the normal tissue, together with the optional RNA expression data. So by looking at the differences between normal and wild type and tumor genomic sequences, it is possible to predict which proteins will be expressed, and when these proteins are calculated, it is possible to predict with machine learning tools the probabilities that they will be expressed on the surface of the cancerous cells. Thus, they became great candidates for immunotherapy as being cancer markers. So this is, I would say, very, very complex analysis. It starts from raw sequenced data, and it is consisted of approximately 150 bioinformatics tools that run in a parallel, in a huge graph. And the result of the analysis is basically a list of prioritized neoantigen candidates that can be that can be used in immunotherapy. So this is one of the examples of application of AI in health, in predicting the antigen, something that I was working on. I want to tell you also about other examples, something that I did on my free time, and also to continue the discussion about building communities. It could be some of the good ways for building the community. I'm talking about dream challenges. Dream challenges are designed and run by a community of researchers to answer important biological or medical questions. So the DREAM is acronym for Dialogue for Reverse Engineering Assessment and Methods. So in other words, the methods for reconstructing some published analysis or answers to some important questions that the community wants to reproduce and maybe to confirm them or deny them with more amounts of data. So the DREAM organization it's using the philosophy of wisdom of the crowd that provides a great impact on science and human health by fostering collaborations. So even though they are called challenges, it's the main idea is not only competing, but also fostering collaborations and obtaining contacts between researchers and strengthening their results and ideas. So it is allowing individuals and groups to collaborate openly. So participation is open to anyone. And the produced results are available to the community in standardized form, standardized data sets and benchmarking methods for eventual future comparisons, analysis, and developments. So the participants are motivated both by recognition and by being a part of the solution. And also anyone with a good question and data to answer that question can propose a dream challenge. It's being conducted on the Synapse platform, which is very convenient for data exchange, for commenting, for publishing results, and exchanging any sort of ideas. I will tell you briefly about the few challenges that I've been participating in the last couple of years. So last year there was a challenge about predicting the prediction of the gestational age from whole blood gene expression data collected from pregnant women. And the second part of the challenge was prediction of the preterm birth, also from whole blood gene expression collected from pregnant women. I don't need to emphasize the importance of it. So knowing the exact week of pregnancy is very important to prevent potential diseases. Unfortunately, the result of this first part, so the top scorer team, they get accuracy of around 1 month in predicting it. So it wasn't that good. It was funny in the overview of the solution they wrote that they didn't manage to beat some lady that's delivering babies. That her own prediction cannot be beaten. But luckily, the second part of the challenge with predicting the potential probability of preterm delivery was with much higher, more than 90% accuracy, and it was very important start for introducing that kind of analysis into future medical exams. So literally by taking the blood sample from the pregnant lady, it is possible to give probability or a risk for a risk pregnancy.
Now, when we come back to these collaborations and the community and the challenges that unite interdisciplinary young innovators and professionals. I would like to ask Milica, so we just mentioned the collaboration between Microsoft and AstraZeneca, and we are aware that both of the companies have representatives in Serbia, which means that we are developing world-class science on both sides simultaneously. Are these collaborations the opportunity that Serbia can take and start leading some of the advantages in the AI sector? And are the examples, such as the model of collaboration between AstraZeneca and Microsoft, can they serve as an example for boosting Serbian AI healthcare ecosystem? And also, do any of these kind of initiatives already exist in Serbia? We can't hear Milica, Peter.
Sorry, I was muted. Those are actually several questions and different issues. The collaboration between AstraZeneca and Microsoft is a wonderful example how something can be the experience, the need, and the top quality and top quality people can be joined together to solve and offer some new solutions. And this is collaboration within the industry, just different types of industry or branches or however. What we are trying to address is collaboration between science and industry, and this is also something very important but much more complex. Not only because it is a different kind of collaboration and the nature of scientists and how everything is regulated regarding the technology transfer, but also there is a big gap between the way how typical scientists or researchers work and organize, and how fast the industry needs some solutions or improvements. Definitely, there is a way to combine many different parts of industry or science and industry, or even just scientists, and to help them to identify some new possibilities and generate solutions that can really make something disruptive and important to bring this solution on the map of the world, not only to help Serbia. I think that we will see this more in the future, especially because this field is particularly attractive to young people. And I see this entrepreneurial spirit now in the research area, in the young engineering students as well. So I think that if we meet next year or year after that, we'll be very happy to discuss some success that is started here in Serbia, in any town or part of Serbia, and it is becoming global and important on the world map of AI experts and investors as well. So I think definitely we will enjoy reading this news and learning from those young people.
Now moving back into more the scientific part of AI again, and I would like to invite Peter to take on this session, but I'll just give a short introduction. So there has been considerable attention to the concern that AI will lead to automation of jobs and displacement of the workforce. I would like to discuss with all of you what are the ethical implications of AI and what are the fears and hopes that AI will bring in future. Petar, can you lead on this, please?
Thank you very much, Stasa. Yeah, I would like to ask a question to Paul, and it's about the applied AI and the reality of it. Is it reality that we are facing, that AI is everywhere and we are using it, it's just hidden somewhere, or is this to be like a future? And I'm not sure about AI taking our jobs. Maybe we're just going to adapt our jobs to AI, but what would be that adoption rate so far when it comes to kind of real AI being applied?
Oh, wow. So that is just a big, huge question that you've asked me there, and I'm not even sure where to start with. But let me let me put it this way. Of course, there is this great talk where people talk about, AI takes over and the singularity and everything like that. And there was this delightful paper by the US AI scientist Patty Mays, who, when she asked a bunch of scientists when they thought like AI was going to take over the world and things like that, she correlated it against their age, and they all almost to a person predicted AI would take over when they turned 65. So I think perhaps we're dealing almost with wishful thinking with a lot of that. It's very unpredictable. But look, I think AI is going to slowly and invisibly move into our lives. As I said earlier, I think we're moving from the phase of the interesting things, of the low-hanging fruit. Now we're going towards the difficult problems. And these will take a lot longer to take over. I'm not particularly concerned. I don't think our lives are going to change overnight, even if they did from a virus this year. But there's still a lot of work for us, at least over the next decade. And that will be my prediction then for when AI will take over.
Before we go to the threats, I would like to discuss a few potential problems that might bring us in near future. And Milica, you mentioned investors and potential capital that Serbia and Balkans in general can attract in terms of AI and healthcare. Could you potentially explain how the intellectual property and kind of commercializing those projects that you're financing could affect the investors or attract the investors? Yeah.
Okay. For what we are doing now in supporting research in AI, we give all the applicants opportunity to regulate their own IP. So at this point, we want to see AI development, and there is a national law that regulates the IP of scientific and research institutions, either faculties or institutes. So we also have some technology transfer offices at universities, not on all universities, but there are some. And if there is a will to get this transferred to industry, there is a way that dean or directors can handle this in accordance with the law. And this is not only for seeing this kind of let's say research download and development download to industry, but also related to any kind of patent or any kind of significant IP potential that should be
Okay. I'm not sure if I can't hear you or everyone else. No, it's fine. We just lost you there for a second. Okay. Let's see if you come back. Okay. Well, let me ask another question. And this question is about threats and what are the threats for applying AI to healthcare, and what would be good, bad, and potentially ugly situations that we might face. Would that be security issues, data quality, different consents and governments? Galia, would you like to tell us more about those things? Oh, sorry. Oh, we have, okay, Milica is back.
Yes, I had a technical issue. I'm not sure if you heard me.
We just heard you a bit to a certain part, but yeah, maybe you can finish your thought. That would be great.
Yes, the thing is that we would like to have more not only publications and conference presence of our AI teams, but we would like to see more patents and more technology transfer to see this put to industry. And for this reason, we're strongly supportive for regulating IP issues between scientists and research institutions, and to having this opportunity to be downloaded to industry.
Well, that's fantastic news. I think that most of the investors and co-investors partners in our network will be happy to hear that. So thank you for pushing that. So Galia, back to you. Could you potentially explain more about threats that we might be facing in healthcare data and AI, whether that's a security issue, data quality, or governance and sharing of data?
I think it's not even threats. I think it's just general state of where the industry is a lot of issues around data sharing. So the healthcare industry being heavily regulated, you naturally want to be extra secure. You need to be a very specific, who has access to what data. The personal identifiable data, personal health information is, there are various compliance. US, EMEA has different kind of levels of that. So I think it's building those secure and trusted environments, whether it's within the organization or whether it's to allow the collaborations of what Paul was talking about before, AstraZeneca and other parties. So how do you share the data in a right way? And especially COVID situation exposed this gap where, a lot of effort has been brought in, but then at the same time, we still had to be very careful about what is shared, what is available. And also, I think another aspect, and again, it's a bit more of a thought that, when we come from a research and development environments down to the production, there's a lot of elements there to be considered, one is from the kind of scalability issue, from kind of how do you take those, how do you bridge that gap? At the same time, it's bringing that security in place, it's bringing those right access and right, any of the parties who are involved should be very aware of the sensitivity of the data. So I think it's one of the main things we see, at least in our work, in our kind of recent engagements. Back to you, please.
Paul, do you have any thoughts on this?
I think Galia has kind of touched on something that's quite important, which is the whole issue of data in there. That we need to get data that we've consented with appropriately, that has appropriate governance over it, and these are not simple issues. We can't just grab data and toss it around, because and particularly in the case of health data, it's very private, it's very intimate data. And so certainly within Astra, there is a massive amount of effort that's spent on doing this right, as I should say, across the industry. So, that data is managed very carefully. And as we obtain new data sources, that process is going to have to be continued and in fact expanded as we move into using electronic health record data, or people's doctors' data, or devices that are coming straight from individuals as well. It has to be handled very carefully, and it's not just a data science problem, I'm fond of saying with a lot of these things. People's health data is just not data, okay? It is very rich, it's very private, it's very contextual. And so this is why we need people from all sorts of backgrounds working together to do this correctly.
Wow, you said it very well. Mixing different people who have different understanding of data science and AI and various different things. That brings me to the question about ethics and implications about ethics when you mix different people who don't understand AI. It's not your explainable AI that, are making decisions based on logic that we humans can understand, even though AI is now even better in making decisions when it comes to especially computer vision, image recognition as well, when it comes to cancer, for example. And it could predict and actually deliver that really care when it comes to health. So what are your thoughts on ethics? I know, Milica, you're very passionate about the ethics and and biases around that.
I wouldn't call it passionate, but I'm aware of the issues, and I was aware of the critical points of many applicants that our expert panel introduced. So I think each country should resolve this individually, but also it should be in some kind of collaboration. This is also very important to be specified, defined, and introduced into new laws and all the procedure wherever AI is blooming, let's say.
Yeah, that's interesting. But there is this aspect of, what's the relationship between humans and AI? And it's always very, very strange, especially now when patient is talking to AI or doctor is talking to AI, and there is kind of a kind of imbalance in what we are used to have. So Galia, can you tell us more about these decision-making algorithms, how you train the neural network in kind of ethical way that he will make the right decisions, and you can't blame the doctor, but you can blame the AI. Do you have any thoughts on that aspect of the future? Sorry, you muted. Can you please unmute?
Yeah, sorry. From our perspective in general, it's never going to be that machine will take a decision. It's probably always going to be somehow, assisting to the doctor. That's probably the best case scenario, because then you can actually bring that active learning and you can bring the loop, to close that loop. But at the same time, I think there are certain, even from the engineering, some software engineering perspective, there are certain kind of programs and open source packages and kind of other, software available to bring additional capabilities around making sure that the models are fair when the models are trained, and you would trust the researchers and the data scientists to build the best models they can given the data they have and the particular domain they're in. But then you might want to bring some additional toolkits where you can actually assess how well your models are performing on a whole of population, or maybe on some particular cohorts of the subpopulation of what you're training on and testing. Mm-hmm. And I think this is where we see it's bringing that additional insight about what is actually your model, how well your model is performing, collecting those insights over the period of time. It actually will then give that feedback to the developers and to the data scientists to build better models, to continue on that iterations.
Amazing. So I guess time will tell, and more data, more structure, and unstructured data will help us more. So we have now a few questions from the audience, actually, and please, whether you're listening and watching this on YouTube, LinkedIn, Twitter, or Facebook, please put your questions in the comments, and then we'll ask our panelists these questions. So I would like to bring this question to the table. So do you, Theo, I guess from London, is asking, do you have any advice for accessing UK patient data, primary genomic data with academia, and how would one approach transferring such data from academic project to commercial use down the line, which is very tricky question, especially with golden rule of NHS here in England. Paul, you had quite intense experience working with government on these things, actually. Would you like to take this?
Okay, I can only offer, it's very context dependent, but I can say that we do have these big resources like the UK Biobank, CPRD, Genomics England, so on and so forth, and they are, I feel that they are surprisingly easy to deal with, to get data with. I mean, it's very rigorous procedure, it's very well governance, and so forth. But for academia, I think that those are just great sources, and they're quite easy to access then. And indeed, they're even, I'm not sure about the precise details of the commercial access, but that can certainly be done. Some people have said to me that it's quite straightforward in there, and in fact that commercial entities don't make enough use of what data is there, because I think they believe that it's difficult to use, or it's only for public academic use, so forth. Now, transferring that data once you start working in academia and then move to commercial circumstance. I don't know about that precisely. I think it might be difficult to change horses midstream, as it were, if you start accessing it in an academic context, then move to commercial. But this is what lawyers are for. So I'm going to refer you to the lawyers for that.
Wow, that's smart. That's smart. So I'm just being conscious of time. We're slowly coming to the end of the session, and I would just like to ask all of our dear panelists for kind of advice, whether that's a book that you can recommend or a resource that you can recommend to people that want to learn more about AI and healthcare.
Yeah, I think almost every book that I've read about AI in healthcare is terrible. So what I will say, quite oddly enough, is I think there are a couple of very good online courses to do with like machine learning of AI and AI in healthcare and so forth. And they do tend towards, there does tend to be this split between the technical and the operational, if you will. So data science on one hand and how hospital IT works. But between the set of those, I think you can actually get a very good and a very low cost look at the field.
Jane.
Yeah, I agree with Paul. I think there are quite a few good online courses. I think the one book which I probably would recommend for people who are a bit more new to the industry, it was, I think, released last year by Eric Topol. It's called Deep Medicine. So he goes in a very good overview of various kind of areas and within the industry where the AI can go into. It doesn't go too technical, but it gives a very broad picture of where we are now and where we're heading to. So I'll definitely recommend that one.
Vladimir, do you have any resources you would like to share?
Yeah, books being held up. Valencia.
Okay, let's see what you have there, Milita. And if you can unmute yourself, please. Sorry.
I keep forgetting that. So this is in Serbian, but I think that it is easily found in any language. It is from a professor from MIT, which he wrote Life 3.0, and it's actually how to be a human in the time of intelligence. So it is a little bit of everything, not only AI in health, but it also tackles that. I think very informative and both philosophical and theoretic and practical, and it is very good mix, either if you're an expert or if you're just a fan of this possibility. And actually something that I was also intrigued by, if I can broaden this issue, the new TV show on Amazon Prime called Upload. It is also very interesting idea of having our soul digitalized and then uploaded to cloud and connected using AI to keep communicating with the people on Earth who are still alive. So this is also something very inspiring. It is not related to this. Maybe we cannot put it to use anytime soon, but definitely something worth discussing with colleagues.
Thank you for that. Vladimir, did you have that?
Yes, so regarding the resources, I could add the challenges that I mentioned, the three challenges, and also the challenges on Kaggle. So usually the people that are new to the artificial intelligence or machine learning, they feel fear, they don't want to participate straight away, but there are also great resources and places to learn from the community, from the examples that other participants are giving. I think it's a fast way to progress and to learn something that's useful in the era that we currently live in.
Well, that's fantastic. I believe that sharing knowledge and kind of creating that collective intelligence is very important, and I'm fascinated actually by DeepMind's publications, because they're quite kind of commercial company owned by Google. that kind of had their way coming out of UCL and other universities, but they now share their knowledge almost as an open source, which is quite great read as well. Stasa, do you have any books or resources you would like to share with us?
Well, I agree. I think I have one advice, being a student at the University of Cambridge, where we have many courses organized around programming, around AI and machine learning. I think this can be something very interesting that Serbian ecosystem can introduce, either collaborating with certain people in the global sites, such as the UK, and where we can give short lectures or on what we know on these topics, such as genomic medicine, for example. I think this is, as we mentioned before, it's a good way to make fertile background for introducing novelties around AI in Serbian ecosystem. So, yeah, just a tip to Milica, maybe.
Great, wonderful. And then just lastly, could you please share any closing remarks, and then where can people find you, or if there is anything you would like to promote? Shall we start with you, Paul, again?
Oh, started with me again. Okay, closing remarks. I think we're at a very interesting time in history that is going to need a lot of different people, a lot of different skills. We have to keep our eye on actually achieving things that are useful as opposed to things that are just interesting. This might be cool. If anyone is interested in the wider sort of data science, bioinformatics things, I run a bi-monthly meetup in London called Bioinformatics London. Look us up in Meetup, and maybe you'll see something talk there that you'd be interested in coming along to. Back to you.
Thank you very much. Galia?
Yeah, thanks. It was a pleasure to be here. I completely agree with Paul around that interdisciplinary thinking, the skills we need in this space to, to make things happen and to bring some new innovation too. If you're interested in learning a bit more what Microsoft is doing in this space, so we actually have our developer conference next week, which is free of charge, and it's online obviously this year. It's called Microsoft Ignite, and there will be quite a few announcements actually within the healthcare space and further progress we're making. So I definitely recommend if you could spend some time to watch those. Thanks again.
I will do, absolutely. Melita?
I would like to introduce you to visit our website and to see, and also our social media. We will introduce very soon all the projects that are supported by the Science Fund related to AI. So I think there is a lot of possibility for collaboration with all those different institutions in Serbia, and I think that you might find very interesting and surprising which areas and AI technologies are being used for this kind of project.
Fantastic. Vladimir, would you like to share something special?
Yeah, I would agree with Paul. We live in a very interesting times, more interesting than a few years back and less interesting than a few years after. And generally, the area of artificial intelligence in health and biomedicine and in general precision medicine, it's something that it's exponentially growing. I would compare it to the growth of IT that started 25 years ago, and I think it's nowadays with the large amounts of genomics, of sequence data, of health records, and the pharma companies that support the science behind of it that drives this growth. I think it will come to at least a different level with the IT industry in general, like in a short period of time. And regarding the contacts and the things that I've been doing, you can find me on Twitter or LinkedIn if you're interested in some of the topics that we've been discussed. Just write a message. I'll be happy to respond.
Amazing. Stasha, any closing remarks from you?
Well, firstly, I would like to thank to all our panelists for being part of this webinar. It's a pity that we had technical issues at the beginning, so we lost a number of audience and as well as the energy with them. So hopefully next time it will be better. Thank you for bringing new evidence from the AI world on table during this webinar. Thanks for the great discussion. Thanks to Peter for moderating this session. And finally, thanks to all the partners that are supporting work of Innovation Forum in Serbia, where we are bridging the gap between science, industry, and the government in the healthcare sector and trying to work with healthcare startups to build them and boost their development. Thanks to Science Technology Park, thanks to Health Tech Lab, and thanks to Peter finally again. It was a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you.
Well, yeah, it was absolute pleasure, really. It's also a true honor to kind of have this conversation and to be part of it. I would like to thank Stasha and everyone, panelists, all the audience and everyone who joined in, who asked questions, and also to Tech London Advocates for connecting us all. And hopefully we will make more of these soon. Well, thank you all and enjoy.
Thank you.
See you all. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.